Chapter 10 In which I discover love, only to have my heart broken, and in revenge I fry Harris's business. I didn't know I was in love until it was all over and it was too late to do anything about it. Newt came home with a plaster cast on his lower left arm, and everything went back to normal. We worked as hard as ever, and the only change seemed to be that he held his morning coffee with one hand instead of two. Love started at the Saturday night dance. Somebody else had burned out or was sick or had run out of money or something. It was never exactly clear to me what had happened, and there was always something happening that required Saturday night dances, and we went to town as we normally did. I had done this several times now, and knew what to expect. I still didn't fit in very well, didn't know any of the other kids, so as soon as I got inside the beer hall while Harris was fighting, and he fought every single time we went to the Saturday night dance, I got an orange pop and sat at a table in the corner until the movie started. Usually nobody bothered me. When Harris was done fighting, he would come inside and get a pop and sit with me, and then we'd go in and watch Gene ride and shoot, or Harris would. He never tired of Gene riding and shooting. I soon grew bored with it all, and on this particular night I was leaning back a bit on my beer crate, not looking at the screen but at the faces of the other kids in the room. There were 14 or 15 of them, ranging in age from 6 to 13 or so. As soon as hard puberty hit, they would be out dancing or in the front of the saloon necking, and the cutoff seemed to be 12 or 13. I couldn't believe they never got sick of the movie, and I was watching them watch when I felt someone doing the same to me, and turned to see the most beautiful girl in the world looking right at me. She had wide blue eyes and blonde hair in braids that hung down her back, and she smiled and didn't look away when I looked at her, and I thought I would die. It was that sudden. I had seen movies where they talked about love at first sight, movies my mother made me sit through, and I was certain that's what was happening here. I turned away, could feel myself blushing savagely, and wished I could just crawl away. I decided to do just that, and made my way to the door and out into the dance room where the music was wanging and whooshing away. It was probably all a mistake. She hadn't really been looking at me, I thought, and took an orange pop and went to my little corner table to watch the dancers. But when I turned to sit, I saw that she had followed me and sat at the same table. "Hi, I'm Elaine." I couldn't say anything. She was about my age, and when I saw her closely in the better light from the stealing Coleman lanterns, she looked even more beautiful. Her eyes seemed to be made of cool ice, and she was wearing a blue dress that matched the color perfectly. "Elaine Peterson." Still I sat silent. Shyness, always a problem with me, now became a terminal illness. I thought I would burst, that in some way the shyness would stop my heart. I could hear it beating, whumping, and the beat seemed irregular, and it seemed entirely possible that I would just sit there like a turd and die. I took a breath, held it in, controlled my voice as much as possible, and blurted my name. She smiled. "We live near Greener Lake, about 4 miles from the Larsons." I asked her why I hadn't seen her at the movie, or thought I did. It came out, "Haven't seen movie you," or something near it. "I've been staying with my grandmother in North Dakota. It's over west of here, 150 miles. She said it like it was another country, and I thought I might tell her that I lived in the Philippines for almost 3 years, and in Texas, and had seen California, and pretty much everything in between. But nothing, absolutely nothing, came out. I don't know how long we could have gone on like that, her talking, me with my tongue clove to the roof of my mouth, wishing I could disappear, but time kicked in and took over. It was late, and the band started on its last dance, a slow waltz, and the movie was done and the rest of the kids came out of the back room. Harris spied me instantly and took in the situation in a glance. He came up to the table, the ubiquitous bottle of orange pop in his hand, and plunked down in a chair. I made eye motions at him to leave, but he ignored them and spoke to Elaine. "How do you like my cousin?" She smiled. "He seems nice." Harris shook his head. "That's what I thought, but he ain't right." I pushed at his shoulder. "What do you mean?" she asked. "In the head. He ain't right. It was something to do with when he was born. They cut the cord too fast or something, and his brain didn't get into the light. It happens all the time. Brains got to get into the light or they don't work right. You remember that Severson kid? How he kept leaning left and ate his snot all the time?" Harris pointed at me with his chin. It's the same with him." "Not true," I said, or attempted to. It really came out more as a blap. The shyness had gotten worse, and I was now in the position of having to convince Elaine that I was indeed right in the head, and did not eat my snot without being able to speak, but it was too late. Elaine was studying me with a new look, one of pity, and she smiled, not unkindly, and nodded and left me sitting there with Harris fuming. "I'll get you for this," I told him. You don't want to mess around with Elaine anyway. Pretty soon you just want to go down there all the time, and then I'd have nobody to play with, and there you'd be hanging around their mailbox hoping to see her." "I'll get you for this," I repeated. "I really will." And as luck would have it, I got my chance the very next day. "I ain't gonna do it." Harris stood by the side of the barn, looking at the wire that came from an insulator near the door and led out into the pasture. Newt had turned the pigs out into the part of the cow pasture to root and dig for a while. Rather than put up hog fence, he bought a battery-operated electric fencer and some insulators and wire. Inside the barn, he put a dry cell 6-volt battery in the fencer to keep them out of the weather, then brought the wire out through the hole. We had half a good day watching the sows figure the wire out. They learned fast, and one of them, old Gertie, learned on the first day to cake mud on her head, let it dry, and then push at the wire with the dry mud insulator to get out into the pasture and into the cornfield. The chickens hit it a few times, squawking and jumping with feathers flying, and even Buzzer accidentally brushed the wire. When it popped him, he took it as an attack and went after it, which of course made it worse and made him more angry, so that he attacked harder, biting and clawing at the wire until finally he admitted defeat and walked away from the fence. Every hair on his body was straight out, and I believe if anybody had crossed him right then, he would have killed. But it was while Buzzer was fighting the wire that the idea came. We had tried touching it with the backs of our fingers and pieces of grass, but the results were inconclusive. I had always been of a scientific nature, believed in the worth of experiments, and I wondered what would happen, watching Buzzer and the fence at war, if somebody actually peed on the wire. Specifically, I wondered what would happen if Harris peed on the wire. I knew it would not be an easy experiment to conduct, and set about doing it carefully. The subject would be reluctant, downright negative as it turned out, and there would have to be some sort of inducement so attractive that it would overcome the reluctance. As it happened, I had the dirty pictures. The power of these pictures to control and induce were beyond question. I believe if given enough of them, Harris would have walked into a bonfire. Indeed, I would have done the same thing. The quality of the pictures wasn't great. They were black and white and small and grainy. But they worked. It was impossible to look at them and still breathe correctly. My dilemma was mostly one of quantity. I knew I could get the experiment to work, but with how much effort? How many pictures would it take? I had, altogether, 7 of them, and since I was interested in them myself, purely from an artistic viewpoint, of course, I didn't want to completely deplete the collection. I offered Harris one picture. It was not the best picture. The best picture I wouldn't have released if Harris had bitten the wire and hung on with his mouth, something I considered suggesting when I remembered what he had done with the first love of my life. But it was a good picture, accurate in detail, fundamentally sound as far as composition and educational benefits were concerned, and far-reaching in its ability to promote advanced stages of hyperventilation. "Nope," he repeated, "I ain't gonna do it." But his refusal was soft. I could sense the weakness in it, and I countered. The picture I'd offered, plus one other, the one where it was possible to see it all. Well, I had him. First, the rules. What rules? You have to pee right on the wire, not just pass over it, and you have to pee on it long enough to get the surge. It was a pulse fencer, not on continuously, but pulsing at 1-second intervals. Otherwise, it's not a deal. He thought another minute, studying the wire. That thing put a sow on her knees. I shook my head. She was off balance. Besides, 2 of the pictures for your very own. That's a good swap. Yet another minute, then a sigh. All right, go get the pictures. I ran to the house, took out the 2 selected pictures, put them under my shirt, and trotted back to the barn where Harris was still standing looking at the wire. "I've got them." "Let me see." I raised my shirt and showed him the pictures, lowered it. "So go ahead, pee on it." He unbuttoned the fly of his bibs and took his business out, then stood there frowning. "What's the matter?" "It don't work. Nothing's coming out." "Push a little." "I am. It's scared. It don't want to do it." "If you don't pee on the wire, the deal is off," I reminded him, thinking it would prompt action. I know. It just won't work." His frown deepened. "It's like it knows what's coming and don't want to do it." 2 pictures. "I'll have to lie to it." "Lie to what?" "My business. I'll just have to lie to it and start peeing over there, then swing it around, make the dumb thing think everything's all right." He turned sideways, aimed away from the fence, and in a moment it started. "So turn," I said, "before it's done." "It ain't that easy. Something in me won't let it happen." "Aw, heck, you're gonna run out." "No, I'm holding her back. Here, now." He turned slowly until the stream of urine was only inches away from the wire, hung there for a second, then hit the wire. "There," he said. "Now are you happy?" He had crossed the wire between pulses when the electricity wasn't moving through the wire, and the pulse hit him halfway through the word happy. Later, I would come to know a great deal about electrical things. I would understand that water is an excellent conductor of electrical energy, but that urine, with its higher mineral content, is even better, and what Harris did amounted to hooking a copper wire from his business to the electric fence. The results were immediate, and everything I would have hoped for from a standpoint of scientific observation, not to mention revenge. In a massive galvanic reaction, every muscle in Harris's body convulsively contracted, jerking like a giant spring had tightened inside him. He went stiff as a poker, then soared up and over backward in a complete flip, arcing a stream that caught the afternoon sun so I swore I could see a rainbow in it. Nor did the spectacle end when he hit the ground. He landed on his side, both legs pumping, then sprung to his feet, running in tight circles, holding himself and hissing, "Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God!" All in all, it was well worth the investment, and when he finally settled, leaning against the barn wall, holding his business, panting loudly, I reached under my shirt to give him the 2 pictures. It was not to be, and the exact responsibility of who owed whom pictures would plague us the rest of the summer, and perhaps does yet. As I held the pictures toward Harris, and he released his groin long enough to reach for them, a shadow fell over us, and I turned to see Louis standing there. He reached down a crooked, filthy hand and took the pictures, held them up to the light, smiled toothlessly, and walked away toward the granary, putting the pictures in the top pocket of his bibs. "Damn!" Harris spoke quietly, and his voice was shaking. "You owe me 2 pictures." "It wasn't my fault. I held them out to you. Louis took them." "They wasn't halfway," he hissed like a snake. "They wasn't even close to halfway. They were over halfway. You liar!" "I am not lying. I handed the pictures over to you, and you were reaching for them when Louis grabbed them. I did what I was supposed to you." "You did?" He sneered or grimaced in pain. It was hard to tell the difference. "I peed on the wire." Later that night, lying in bed in the darkened room, listening to the drone of mosquitoes fighting the screen, I remembered him hitting the wire and started laughing. "It ain't funny," he said from the other bed. "I'm all swole up. It's like my business was hit by lightning." "It is too funny. You ran in little circles yelling, 'Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God.'" I had to bury my face in the pillow to hold the sound of laughing down so it wouldn't wake the grown-ups. For a time there was silence, then he giggled. "I think I saw him." "Who?" "Jesus, you dope. But he wasn't in no peach tree." And still later, when the giggling had subsided and we were nearly asleep, through a half doze I heard him one more time. "You still owe me 2 pictures." "No, I don't." "You do." "Don't." "Do."